Our community carries a collection of stories that tell us who we are and what we're all about. And if you dig enough, you might encounter tales of the supernatural. Those are the stories that drew the focus of library assistant John Eury. For Halloween this year, John collected a batch of his favorite local tales of terror, and now he's road tripping around the county, visiting all 5 library branches. With each stop, he's sharing location-specific ghost stories. And as he puts it, those hours of research led him to a simple conclusion. There's no place weirder than Cabarrus County. I'm Dominique Clark, and on this episode of Did Y'all Hear, we're checking in with John's session in Kannapolis, where he tells of the poltergeist of the poorhouse, the ghost of Idiot Circle, the haunted horseman of Memorial Garden, and many, many more. So sit back, relax, and try not to...
Okay, so it's 6 o'clock, so we'll start. So I'll say good evening, or perhaps I should say good evening. Welcome to Cabarrus County Ghost Stories. My name is John Eury, and since I'm in Kannapolis tonight, I wore green pants, which pains me because I am not just a Concord native, but a graduate of Concord High School. Well, you've all had the bell for like 10 years or so, and so maybe one day we'll get it back. I'm not gonna hold my breath, but. So tonight, I'm going to be telling about 7 or 8 ghost stories that's taking place in Kannapolis and also around about Cabarrus County. A couple of things I want to mention first, little disclaimers. I want to be forewarned that even though this presentation is going to be slightly irreverent in parts, many of the stories here involve death and or killing. Because, that's how you become a ghost, is that you got to die. And number 2, the places that we'll refer to in here, the private residences. They may be places of business, places of worship, places where people are resting in peace. So please respect their privacy and their business. Don't go to some place and say, "Can we see your ghost?" So without further ado, we're going to start mentioning that Cabarrus County, according to Roger Manley, author of the book Weird Carolina, says North Carolina is a world vortex of weirdness. You mentioned South Carolina too, but this is about North Carolina, so I'm not going to bother with South Carolina. I think North Carolina is probably much more weirder than South Carolina. So what's weirder than ghosts, haunted houses and graveyards, spirits, strange lights, and other paranormal phenomena? So hopefully, by the end of this program this evening, that I will demonstrate Cabarrus County is the epicenter of weirdness in North Carolina. There's no place weirder than Cabarrus County. So we're going to start off with a bang with the Poltergeists of the Poorhouse. This place has some of the wildest and craziest stories that you'll probably hear tonight. This was the Cabarrus County Poorhouse. It was former home of J.P. Josiah Pemberton White. He built it in the 1820s and 30s, close to where Cook's Crossing is. Y'all know where Cook's Crossing is at, out by, close to where the DMV and the interstate is on the Kannapolis Highway. It used to be called Highway 29A. It's had a long and storied history. Started out as a private residence, was a tavern for a while. Then in the mid-1850s, the county decided to make it into a poorhouse, where they would take people who were poor and couldn't fend for themselves. They would take the sick, or the people deemed to be insane, the people of various stages of life, and they would just house them here. This is way before, even Kannapolis was even thought of, so it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. But it had a very long, lurid history of haunted horrors. Strange noises always seemed to be heard in this place, especially when it was a tavern. One time, a ghost was seen bouncing around about, knocking over tables and chairs and bottles. The ghost would seem to come up here in what was the attic of the house. So they did some investigating. They looked up to the attic, and they found a skeleton. Like sometime, somewhere, somehow, somebody put a body up into the attic. So they figure, well, that is the ghost of the person who got killed. They stuffed his body up there to try to hide it. He's looking for whoever tried to kill him. Another time, a terrible crime took place after the tavern was closed. A man raped and killed 2 women, and then after he realized the horror of what he did, he killed himself. The various inhabitants of it was a tavern, it was the poorhouse, then later on when it became a private residence, they could still hear the sounds of fighting and struggle coming and screaming coming from when that violent attack occurred. Then after it was a poorhouse, since it was close to the railroad tracks, sometimes some of the people inside the house would wander away. And they would walk close to where the railroad tracks were, especially ones who were sick, who were mentally ill. They would get run over by the train. That happened numerous times. And then they would see the spirits of those people around about where they were killed on the train. And sometimes close to where they were, after the places where they got run over by the train, they would see a light, a strange light flickering, as that's to indicate that is where these poor people were killed. Another strange incident that happened one time, mysterious holes would pop up in the ground, almost like crop circles. And then the spirits of the people who had been killed would come walk around the perimeter of the poorhouse. Now here's the wildest story. Up here, also in the attic, that was also what they called the cooling room, or the cooler. Whenever someone in the inhabitant or inmate at the house passed away, their bodies would be taken upstairs to be prepared for the funeral. One time, after a poor, unfortunate person passed away, their body was taken upstairs into the cooler for the funeral. They had the funeral procession in a wagon. They're going to take them across the railroad track to go probably to the Mount Olivet Cemetery, which is around about that way. So as the funeral procession was clomping down the road and across the track, all of a sudden the spirit of the deceased popped up. This spooked the horses. The horses jumped and bridled, and then the funeral wagon comes barreling down the road, and then all the other carts in the procession go barreling down the road, never to be seen again. The home was closed about 1918, and then the house changed over hands, became a private residence. This is a picture taken in the early 1970s. The house was moved a couple different places, ended up on Ridge Avenue, and finally towards the end, it was all off of Skyway Drive. Even though it wasn't a poorhouse anymore, it wasn't a tavern anymore, they could not escape the ghostly inhabitants who had lived there. Various people who lived in that house over the years, they would hear screams. They would see people walking around, shadows, doors opening, closing. And over time, obviously that's not something you go put on the Zillow ad for a house. Oh, we have ghosts inside here. The house became dilapidated. Earlier this century, they were going to try to make a concerted effort to preserve the building. But unfortunately, it collapsed in 2020 before they could salvage the house to try to rebuild it and remodel it. But I like to think that it didn't just collapse because of decay and dilapidation. It also collapsed because of all the ghosts and poltergeists that were gathering around it. Now, our next group of stories is going to take place in downtown Kannapolis, and I call it the Ghosts of Idiot Circle. Now, how many of you are familiar with calling downtown Kannapolis Idiot Circle? I imagine most of you are. I don't know who came up with that. I'm guessing it's somebody from Concord. But I'll let you in a little secret that I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and we were around circles in Concord too. We would start off on Church Street at what was Martin's Drive-In, where Wayside is now, drive up around the Carolina Mall, drive up the block of Church Street to McDonald's, and drive back down over and over again. Of course, folks in Kannapolis, you drive here and up there, around to here. This picture was taken in the early 1980s when they were trying to rechristen downtown Kannapolis. They called it Cannon Village. So let's go through a couple of stories that's taken place in downtown Kannapolis. So we're going to start with the Gym Theater. This picture here is from a postcard from the 30s and 40s, and this is a picture of it recently that I took. A couple interesting stories involve the gym. One involves sometime, I think back in the 40s or so, a couple of kids out hanging around. They go on a service ladder that's behind the gym. They climb up to the roof, and they go up here, up around, looking over the edge to the neon sign. So they're just looking around, just being doing things like kids do. As they were looking down, they saw walking on the sidewalk, there's like a group of kids wearing old, tattered clothes. The kids would walk back and forth and back. And all of a sudden, disappeared. And so they got out off the top of that building in a hurry. Another story involving the ghosts of the gym involves a couple of guys that are cleaning up in the concession area. If one guy was sweeping the steps, the other guy was watching the counter. So the guy on the counter, he sees something move in the security camera. So he looks into the camera and he sees up on the second floor, there's a kid coming out of the bathroom. And then the kid runs down the steps near where the guy was over there sweeping. So he looked, see he's going to catch him, he's going to say, "What you doing up there?" But he didn't see anybody over there. So he goes to his friend and he says, "Did you see that kid run past you?" And the other guy says, "What kid? There ain't nobody else in here but us." So they look upstairs and see anybody, look around. Where that kid was, he'd vanished. Another place in the downtown Kannapolis area that is seeing ghosts is the Chop House, which is right down the block from where the gym is at. Story I found on a Facebook page people were discussing involves a lady who was working there. She remarked that down below in the basement, they have a cooler where they store beer and wine and other things. And she would see the motion sensor would get set off. So you look at the security footage, see what's setting the sensor off, especially if there's nobody else in the building. And they notice they see this little man was running around. He'd run from this side, he'd run from that side, he'd run all over the basement. The woman and other people working there, they scratched their head, say, "What's going on?" So they look down there. At first they thought, the sensor gets set off, we don't see anything. Maybe it's like an air conditioning vent coming on. Maybe it's blowing some dust or something. Maybe that's setting it off. But they could see like the faint outlines of somebody moving around there. So our next story is called The Ghosts in the Graveyard. And this takes place right around the corner. At the Kannapolis Cemetery, right next to the Village Park, right near the library and the Y. It is originally known as Baker Cemetery, as you can tell from the historic marker there. Now this story involves a young man named Hoyle Beam. He was a teenager, about 16 years old. He was having an argument with his father. You know how it is between fathers and sons and children when they're teenagers. There's always fighting going on. So Hoyle and his dad, they have an argument. So Hoyle runs away. He decides he's going to get out of Kannapolis, so he's going to hop on a train. So he tries to hop on the train, but he falls off and he is killed. So he died in 1922 at 16 years of age. And his father had buried him in the plot in the cemetery. This grave can be easily seen if you turn into the Village Park parking lot. If you look over to the left, it's in the corner, right close to the corner there. You'll see a flat grave. But soon after poor Hoyle met his end, he started to come back and haunt his father. He would say, "Dad, Dad." Needless to say, his father already probably tore up and racked with guilt because of the argument he had with his son. Sometimes you wish you could take it all back after something like that happens. But unfortunately, in this case, he could not. Obviously, he got spooked by that. So every so often, Hoyle would come back. His dad would see the ghost of his son prowling around the house. Sometimes he would talk to him. Sometimes he would just kind of be there. Obviously, that was too much for Mr. Bean. Haunted by his son and also the guilt of everything that happened. So Mr. Bean used his bean and came up with a brilliant idea. if his son is coming out of the grave to haunt him, he would put a cement slab over the top of his grave. So you think, well, that's good. There's no way that spirit can rise out of that over that cement slab, so everything's going to be fine. Well, that idea worked about as well as you think it did. It worked for a while. He didn't see his ghost, so he thought everything he was going to be all right. He had to have some peace, but unfortunately for Mr. Bean, oil started coming back. So how did his foolproof plan get foiled? Because of this. If you look to the left-hand side of the grave, you'll see a crack. And then right next to that crack, you'll see a hole. So it's surmised that Hoyle, to get out of the grave, but made a crack inside there, made a hole, and his spirit will come out and he'll go haunt his father. And so he continued to appear to his father off and on for the rest of his father's life. I think his father died in the late 1940s. But people will still occasionally see something in the cemetery. They even can see something around some of the houses in the neighborhoods around the cemetery. So if you're walking the loop here, if you see some shadow or something mysterious moving around here, that's Hoyle Bean. So since we're on the subject of cemeteries, we're going to go back to Concord. I'm going to talk about the Haunted Horseman of Memorial Garden. How many of y'all been to Memorial Garden? It's a very lovely, tranquil place on Spring Street, especially in the springtime when the flowers are blooming. Now, if you go into Memorial Garden, you go to your left, you walk up a little hill, you will see a grave laying flat here on the right near a couple of hedges. This is the grave of George Yeaman. George Yeaman was a Scottish man. He was part of a traveling circus. He was an equestrian. And he was really the star of the show. Even with all the animals and the strongmen and this and that you see in circuses, many of these people who would come to the circus would come to see George. He had this long red coat, this red top hat. He rode a white horse. He'd do all kinds of thrilling, death-defying stunts. He would leap over hurdles. He would shoot flaming arrows. All kinds of different things, jumping around and moving on his horse. One time, a couple versions of the story has this incident taking place in Salisbury. Others have it taking place in Concord. He was on his horse. The horse rears back. George falls down and dies. The tragedy of the situation really affected the community. And Memorial Garden at that time was the home of First Presbyterian Church in Concord, small wooden clapboard church founded in 1804, I believe. And so they offered to bury George here because obviously no one could afford to ship his body back to Scotland. And his wife was a part of the traveling party in the circus. And George was a Mason, and over the years, people would come write stuff on his grave. People from other traveling circuses would come and leave things there because he was well thought of in the circus community. So this is what his grave says. In memory of George Yeaman, equestrian, born in Edinburgh, Scotland, January 13th, 1801. Departed this life November 7th, 1827. And his wife composed the epitaph, which you can see the outlines here. And if you can walk up to the grave in the Memorial Garden, you can see it. And she said, not very long, 26 years old. This is what his wife wrote. Fare thee well and sleep forever. Fare thee well, my husband dear. May guardian angels over thee hover, while on earth I linger here. And she died not a few years after George passed on. But guess what? George is still lingering here. Numerous people over the years, especially groundskeepers at Memorial Garden, reported that they've seen a tall, slender man wearing a red top hat and a long red coat walking around the garden. Sometimes he's reported he's riding a horse, but most of the time he's walking around. And it looks like he's looking for something. Some say, well, maybe he's looking for his horse. or he's looking for his wife, or he's looking for a way back to Scotland, or he's looking for where the circus is gone. They will see him walking around. Even stranger, there are a couple of benches that are nearby George's grave. If you continue to go up the little hill, then to the right, there's this wooden bench here. And then just a little bit away, there's this steps where I think where the rest of the garden ventures this way and starts to go back down. There are these concrete benches here too. George has been seen sitting on one of these benches. You got to figure out, being a ghost is hard work, so even a ghost has to take a break sometime. So if you're walking around downtown Concord in the evening, if you're part of the walking around from the social district, or if you're going to the parking deck or just taking a walk, if you see something flashing red in Memorial Garden, you see somebody wearing a red hat or a red jacket, that's George Yeaman. Now our next story, we're going to hop on the train and talk about the ghastly ghost light. So we're going to take the train going north to Concord, the old Concord Rail Depot. How many of you have been around long enough to remember where the rail depot was in Concord? But to give you the idea where it was off of Cabarrus Avenue, what was then called Scott Avenue, by Cannon Mills Plant 5. In this postcard, you can see in the background where Plant 5 was. And it goes under the bridge here. This bridge has been renamed the Allen Small Bridge after former principal and city councilman Allen Small. Is a better shot of what the depot looked like. This was taken from the 70s, and there's Plant 5, and there's the railroad track. And this is what it looks like today. There's some nice townhomes on where the other street was. But right here, it looks kind of spooky and foreboding. This story involves a man named Alexander Campbell. He was a railroad brakeman. So on December 4th, 1888, Alexander Campbell was right across between two train tracks. He falls between the two cars and he's run over by the train. So he died of those gruesome injuries. Soon afterward, people report they would see a light around that part of the track by the depot where Alexander Campbell was killed. But the strangest instance happened one time. The train was coming by, and the engineer saw the light. He was not knowing too much of the story, so he stops his train, thinking that the light was there to warn him about something. The light goes off. So the engineer is scratching his head, saying, what did he turn the light off for? He stopped the train. So he starts the train up again. The light comes back on. So I think the engineer, he probably reported to his boss, the next time you assign me to take the train through Concord, please don't. There's some strange stuff going on over there. So the ghost light appeared nightly, always about the same place where Alexander Campbell died, and always about the same time that he died. Then, by the end of the 19th century, it disappeared, and no one has seen it since. So if the version of the story where Alexander Campbell lost his head, maybe he found it, that's why the light went off. But I don't know about you, but I don't think I'm going to be going down there looking around to see if I see a ghost light or not. And so our last story is the Shrieking Spirit of Reed Gold Mine. Y'all are familiar, I'm sure, of the history of Reed Gold Mine, about how John Reed was out fishing, discovered a gold nugget, But before that other gold rush you might have heard about in California happened, Cabarrus County was like the gold mining capital of the United States. And it was a big thing. There's some pictures that I took a recent trip to Reed Gold Mine. You can see, even though it's well lit, it's still kind of spooky and foreboding looking. It was a big thing, and people from all over the world would come to work in the mine to try to stake their fortune. There's this one couple that came from Wales named William and Eleanor Mills. William worked in the mine, and Eleanor, she would was a seamstress and cooking and other things. to support the family. But Eleanor was homesick. She missed Wales. She wanted to go back home. And William wanted to stay here because he knew he was going to strike it rich on the gold mine. So they argued a lot. One time while they were arguing, Eleanor tripped on the hem of her dress. She fell face first into a bench. Hit her head on the corner and she died. William tried to revive her, but it was a no-go. She was dead. Now, William was a typical guy. You know how guys are. We figure, well, this is all like a bad dream. I'll sleep it off. Everything will be good as new in the morning. But unfortunately not. Instead of being good as new, poor Eleanor was good as dead. But William would hear Eleanor in his dreams. He would say, I want to go home. I want to go home. So he woke up the next morning, saw that Eleanor was dead. You could still hear those voices saying, I want to go home. Take me home. So William, trying to assuage his guilt, he goes out to the engine shaft, which is the deepest shaft at Reed Gold Mine, which at that time was closed, and he dumps her body into that shaft. So he's thinking, this will take care of that. The body's gone. Nobody will ever see it again. I just get on with trying to find my grub stake. But that didn't work out so well. You can hear her say, take me home, over and over again. Take me home. I want to go home. So the poor guy kept on drinking heavily, but you still hear those voices. So he ran away, never to be heard from again. Miners over the years report they would see an apparition in my mind saying, take me home. I want to go home. Or sometimes they'd just scream. See, we spare nothing for special effects here. But then it tapered off after the mine ran its course in the later part of the 19th century. Then the mine reopened in the 70s as a historic site. But people would still occasionally see an apparition walking around the shafts. Occasionally they would still hear this plaintive, take me home, I want to go home. Or sometimes they would hear, you don't have to scream this time. Sometimes they would hear the screaming and the yelling. So to investigate this story, about 15 years ago, a couple of ghost hunters, they decided they would prowl around and look in the mine, see if there's any truth to this story. They didn't hear any yelling, but they took some pictures. I don't know if you can tell this picture here, but right in the middle there's something. So they took another picture, lightened it up. You can see the very faint outline of, looks like a person. Now this picture, lightened up even more, you can really see what looks like a person standing there. Is that Eleanor or is it somebody else? I'll be doing this program in Midland on October the 29th. If you come to that, you'll hear about Eleanor. We also hear about who else might be haunting Reed Gold Mine. Well, thanks for letting me come here tonight and talk to you. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that you will appreciate the supernatural heritage that is out about, and you never know when it comes hit you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us on this special Halloween edition of Did Y'all Hear? And thanks to John for all the effort in pulling these sessions together. Oh, and a special shout out to our guest screamer, the library's own Montressa Hunter. If you want to see John in person, you have 3 more chances. He'll be at the Afton branch on October 28th at 6 p.m., the Midland branch on October 29th at 5:30 p.m., and the Mount Pleasant branch on October 30th at 6 p.m. Swing by if you dare. Happy Halloween, y'all.